Hey everybody, Nick here, and today we got a disassembly video for you on this little guy right here. This is the Reate Jack. Alrighty. This guy is dead centered, running pretty damn well out of the box, but maybe we'll be able to get it even running a little bit better. This is a very weird knife in a couple of ways. The biggest one of which is that the blade is detachable. That's not a thing. I mean, you can usually detach the blade from the pivot, but the blade itself, you can remove this part of the blade from this part and swap on a comb if you want to. This is a weird piece right here. But the other thing that makes it weird is that this is an integral pocket knife. There is just one piece of titanium that's making up the backside of the handle here. As a result, usually when there's an integral knife, that means that the stop pin is mounted someplace inside here, and that's a difficult thing to do when you're an integral, right? Because you can't, just put a random hole in there to put the stop pin in. You can't sandwich the stop pin between the scales. I suspect that's why we've got this pivot collar here, but let's go on ahead and give this guy a shot. This is a, I believe these are all T8 around the outside there. Beautiful. All right, and what I'm going to do here, I'm assuming that these are all identical. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is just in this top corner here, I'm going to lay these guys out roughly as they came off the knife. I really, truly, deeply do not expect from an outfit like Reate that they're going to screw this up. Did I really just throw that screw under the table? I sure did. They're going to screw this up, huh? Okay, come here, screw. As I slide under the table. All right. This is why you keep a flashlight nearby, because it always makes things easier. Okay, so that guy lives here. I just don't know how this is going to go down. In fact, when I got this guy actually on loan from my buddy Travis over at the Knife Joker, this is a relatively small company that is a knife retailer. I ended up picking up a Spyderco McBee for a buddy from them at Blade West, actually, because they happened to have one in stock, and he happened to be looking, so it's just like a proxy buy, nothing channel related. But anyways, afterwards he said, "You jackass, you stopped by my table, you didn't even tell me who you were." It was a beautiful thing, but nonetheless, he said, "Hey, enjoy the disassembly. I gather it might not be trivial." So, what the heck? Okay, this is just a free spinning pivot then. Hopefully, he says just a free spinning pivot then. All right, let's go ahead and I'm going to put this screwdriver in the other side here just to hold that steady, and then hopefully I'll be able to turn this. There we go. Yep, free spinning. Now, hopefully, I've done this from the correct side, and what I can do is remove this pivot screw here. Good. And then I'll just place it in the middle. So now we have all of these nice little pivot screw guys in the middle there. And then I assume that means that I'll be able to pull this disc off here somehow or another. Why is this disc not just coming off? Could just be tight tolerances. Could be that it's Loctited to the pivot somehow. Actually, let's see. If I turn this here, on the back side, yeah. Okay, so that just means that there are tight tolerances around the pivot there. And that's fine, because I can hold this down and turn. Okay. So it is just, stuck on there a little bit. What I'm going to go ahead and use, and if you're ever curious about any of the tools that I'm using, go to nickshabazz.com/tools, but I'm going to use this little plastic spudger guy. This is literally a piece of plastic, and it is designed to, as it say, break before your device does. But this is a relatively non-scratching approach to getting inside of a pocket knife and to removing, if I need to pry something loose, it's a pretty good way to go about it, because there's really not much this is going to do, even to paints and coatings and things like that. So my goal here is just to kind of get a little bit of something underneath here. The real question, though, is could it be the case? No, I know that it's not the case that this thing is spinning with the other side, because the other side isn't spinning. So it's not the case that these two are somehow linked all the way through. But likely what's going on here is just that there's a little bit of, yeah. So one other approach that I can take here is actually to use this little spudger tool to kind of push the pivot out. And in fact, I know I'm going to need to push the pivot out because this is an integral pocket knife. Because it's an integral, the way that I'm going to have to take this guy apart is, in all likelihood, I'm going to have to push the pivot through. That will allow me to pull the blade out, and then the bearing should be underneath here, I bet. And that should allow me to have access to everything. Anyways, let's go on ahead and do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the T6 head of this. That should get in to the bottom of the pivot there. Yeah, beautiful. Without interfering with anything. There we go. So I'm just popping the pivot through. Now that I've popped the pivot through, I sort of imagine that this little disc is going to come off pretty readily. As soon as I just get under there with this spudger here, I should be able to lift that off. Okay, there we go. This is exactly how this works. Beautiful. So what we have here, oh, there's no stop pin because the thumb stud is the stop pin. All right, that makes sense. Hey, not a brilliant man. So on this little guy right here, there is a bearing race, which I'll need to reinstall. And then the bearing is set inside there. So I'll just go ahead and push back through. Keep pushing with this spudger here. And sometimes if you're pushing a pivot out, it's a good idea to release the lock bar tension just to get some of that, get some of the force out of the system. So I'll press down the lock bar and keep pressing out the pivot here. Let's go ahead and close this just so I have one less thing that'll take the tension off the lock bar. Now, one thing I need to be very careful about is I pull the blade out of here, and I am going to pull the blade out of here in a second, is I want to make sure that I am not accidentally letting the lock bar clang against the other side of the knife. That's not good. That's, in fact, something that is decidedly ungood. So let's go ahead and pop this bearing out here. My dream, my hope, my fondest desire is that I can then pop the... Oh, damn. Okay, I think I get what's going on here. Unfortunately, what I need to do is remove this side as well. Because the reason I say that is because it sure appears that there is a groove in the blade, but that the bearings don't fit entirely all the way through here. So I'm not going to be able to remove the blade and just pull the blade out until I remove the bearing on the other side. So I'll go ahead and I'll put this here. And I'll put this over here. And then I have to come back in here and I need to remove these screws as well. Luckily, there's no real sign of any strong thread lock here. So I'll go ahead and I'll do this. I'll say, one of the advantages, generally speaking, I want this to be here. One of the advantages, generally speaking, of integral knives is they're a little bit simpler in their disassembly because there's literally just one screw that you need, particularly in like the Spyderco Nirvana family of integral sort of things where you've just got a, the way to disassemble it is you take out the pivot and then the bearings and the blade slide into the resulting hole, you know? This does not appear to be following that adage. This is an integral knife that is certainly fine in its construction, but also a little tricky to put together and take apart. So we pop this last screw out. What this should allow me to do then is to get up inside of here with this spudger again and perhaps pry this guy loose. What is holding this in place? Okay, that's rotating now. That's good. That's a start. Since this is also the lock bar over travel, so the lock bar over travel stop, that gives me a little hole to get in here. There we go. Pop that loose. Okay, so now this is popped loose, along with its washer, which I'll set off to the side here. Now what I just need to do is get in there and fish out this bearing. Once I've fished out this bearing, what I should be able to do is just pull the blade itself the rest of the way out. I think I'm hooked on the tent ball right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this spudger here. And this was a consequence of my trying to do all this disassembly with the, maybe I was hooked on the detent and I could have avoided taking out this second bearing. Either way, there's no real harm in it, but it's something to keep in mind. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to insert this spudger right here. And that's going to hopefully help me to prevent the lock bar from going kerpling and bouncing off the other side there. Shouldn't be a major issue, but I want to release this lock bar very slowly such that, okay, see, it doesn't go all the way over, and so there we go. We are all done here. Well, no, obviously we're not all done here. The knife's not even freaking close to being put back together, but at the same time, we have done all the disassembly steps here. Now we're in cleanup mode. Oh, okay. This is an interesting piece. There is, you know, the biggest question everybody's shouting to themselves right now is, Nick, why the heck would you do this? Not take the knife apart. That's just the nature of my channel, right? But the bigger question is, why would you design a knife in this way? What is the advantage, not necessarily of integrality, but of, you know, all of this whole affair? As I said, there are much, much, much more easy integrals. I am staring something very important right in the face here, and that's actually something I need to acknowledge. So, your average folding pocket knife, right, has a blade that's made of steel. As a result, the lock face, the part of the frame lock touches, as well as the bearing race are steel by definition, right? If the blade itself is steel, then this surface here and this surface here will be steel by definition. This knife has a titanium holder. This whole black area here is titanium. And so in order to have a secure lock face, as well as a bearing race, as well as a surface for the pivot to rotate on, they needed to put in a steel lockup insert. I don't even know what the term for this is because it's not a thing that's aside from this particular knife. This isn't something that exists. But nevertheless, what they've done here is, how did I not comment on this? They have basically created a little insert here into the titanium that allows you to take the knife, that allows the, also the detent ball rides on the steel, not the titanium. So it's actually a really nice idea, and it's well executed here. We don't need to take this out. Oh God, do I not want to take that out. But nonetheless, that is something that is unlike any other pocket knife that I'm aware of because no other pocket knife is trying to do this kind of thing. So we've cleaned that out. There are actually no contact surfaces here. I'll go ahead and I'll run this piece of cloth across the detent ball here just so I can try and avoid, just so I can clean that off a little bit. There we go. That's the downside with some parts of integrals, is they're a little trickier to take down, or take down. They're a little trickier to clean out, but because actually the part of the bearings that runs up against something is running up against these washers here, that actually makes our lives a little easier when we're cleaning things up, because we don't have to try and clean up in the internal part there. So we can put those there, put those there. This has a lot of parts. A lot of parts. It is running relatively dry right now. I'm gonna fix that. As any of you guys know, I am X on Shabazz. As a result, this guy is probably gonna be running a little wetter when I'm done with it. But okay. One thing that I'm seeing here, and actually one thing that's given me some validation, check this out. If we put the washer fully in place here, it is in fact wider than the blade itself. So as a result, we could not have pulled the blade out without removing both sides, I believe. Maybe I could have pushed it. Maybe I could have spread this apart a little bit, but there's no sense in pushing it. If you ever have to brute force anything as you're taking a knife apart, you're probably doing it really wrong. So keep that in mind. The other thing to note is that we don't need to remove this carbon fiber, which is a beautiful thing. Is that hidden hardware on the inside? No. Holy crap, that is. This is hidden hardware. They have screwed into the carbon fiber from the inside of this. On this side, they have a little Torx driver that has a little elbow to it, so they can go. That's neat. This is, look. Did this knife have to exist? Probably not. However, it's damn cool. It is a really interesting piece here. Reate, I feel like this knife is probably less interesting as a pocket knife for your majority of people than it is as a, frankly, than it is just as a piece of technology. As a, holy crap, look at what Reate did. So reassembly here. Here's my strategy. We'll see if it pays off. What I'm going to do is I've already oiled the detent ball path and the detent ball. I'm going to also put a little bit of oil right here on the bearing race. And by the way, multi-row bearings. Nice. This is really Reate flexing. We know this quite well now. So I'll go ahead and I'll put the bearing in place, and I'll also just rotate this around here just to make sure that that oil is covering the entire bearing race. Beautiful. And all of the bearings. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do, can I get this in here? Nah, that's dangerous. I'm not going to bother. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to put the bearing in here. And I'm starting from this side so that I can insert the pivot from this side as well. Because that'll give me something, that'll be important for me to be able to do. Now, as I'm reassembling this, I want to make sure that the part of the washer that was touching the bearings before is touching again. And we can see little bearing lines on there. They're pretty weak because I haven't, been using this guy much, but it's factory freaking fresh. But I'll drop that in place. Then finally, I'll drop this guy in. So the next step is going to be to align all of this to get these screws in position here. Looks like we're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and just start screwing these guys in. There is no way I'm going to use thread locker here because these are relatively small screws and there were a bunch of them. So no, absolutely freaking not. Screw that in. Screw this in. There's a lot of screwing going on here. This is... Yep. We have ourselves a veritable... Yeah, we're not going there. Anyways, back at the ranch. So I'm kind of impressed. Okay, I just had this moment of terror. Did I put in the bearing? Like, yeah, you put in the bearing, idiot. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to screw in all 6 of these guys. Just because, well, I might as well get it done, right? Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert the pivot. Inserting the pivot's going to be a little tricky here because, well, the pivot is... the blade is not natively going to want to be where the pivot wants it to be. Because I need to get this pivot, basically, and I'll go ahead and I'll just put a little bit of lubrication on the pivot itself. This will help, and the reason I'm putting it on the pivot rather than the pivot hole is just so that I am able to use this lubrication as I slide the pivot into place. So what I do here is I sit the pivot here, right? And I get it so it's kind of started. So it's pushed in as far as I can push it in right now. Now, while supporting the blade, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to push on the lock bar here. Then I'm going to reach around. By pushing on the lock bar, it allows me to move the blade further. It allows me to move the blade in position. Now, I'm going to use my index finger here, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to try and push this pivot up into its position. There we go. So now we've got the blade itself slowly but surely getting speared by the pivot. There we go. Now the pivot is all the way through. So the knife is, wow, that went, I'm not going to say anything more until this is over. I was about to say things like, oh, that was easy, but no, let's wait until it's been done. Go ahead and I'll put this in here, and I'm just using this to rotate this, make sure the bearings get nice and coated. Now, again, we reinstall this with an eye to making sure that yep, I see the bearing tracks worn into there, so I'll drop it with this side down. Then I put this in here. Okay. You know, this is ridiculous. This knife, frankly, I am going to go so far as to say that this knife is completely and totally freaking redonkulous. There is no part of this knife that is reasonable in any particular way. I mean, this is a knife that ships with a comb attachment. We're not looking at normalcy here, but that's okay. Normal is just a setting on the dishwasher. And kids, if you ever meet somebody you suspect is normal, you just don't know them well enough yet. Chances are they're weird. So if somebody calls you weird, just be like, yeah, you too, buddy. So anyways, I digress. This is a really weird knife, though. Perhaps beyond anything else I've seen out of Reate. This is on the order of, like, I'm wondering whether Elijah Isham was somehow involved. With the weird, I don't believe he was. That's not a conspiracy theory here or anything like that. But this feels like the kind of weird stuff he would come up with, right? But okay. So I'm screwing this into place here and making sure that I'm not over tightening because I don't want to strip anything here. We're already doing a lot of stripping, or a lot of screwing. We don't need to be doing any stripping too. Try and confine our sins to one domain. Then I'm going to go ahead. I am going to put a little Loctite on this pivot screw here because that'll make things a little easier. This is non-trivial here. All right. So, wow. Now I put this into position here and I turn. I turn. And I'm going to go ahead. Something's wrong here. It's quiet. Too quiet. Something's very wrong. What's wrong here? Could I have over-tightened the pivot? That's a very real possibility. That seems to be the possibility. Okay. Loosen that up a little more. Huh. Something's weird here. Okay. Wait a second. Okay, so I'm an idiot. Learn from me, people. Learn from me. You know what I just noticed? I just noticed this. See that little gap right there? That means that this side spacer needed to go on the other side. So I need to take all of these damn screws off again. And I need to swap this such that that little cutout is sitting above the lock bar. Because right now what's going on is that the lock bar is actually being stopped too soon. And so as a result, the lock bar is being pushed into the blade. And that's not great. And that means that that's why the action is so crappy. And by the way, I'm getting no sense that these screws differ in any meaningful way. So I'm just going to take them off in an arbitrary order here. So that's why we're having this bad action. It's because the lock bar is being pushed down too hard because the cutout that belongs on the lock bar side is actually missing on that side. So I assumed that these two pieces were the same thing, when in reality they, oh God, I need to take this whole damn thing apart again. Oh, okay. I absolutely do need to take the whole damn thing apart again. So because, oh, ay, ay, ay. I can't remove either of these with the pivot in place. Okay. We're learning here. Learn from me. Go ahead and pull that out of the place there. By removing that, that gives me the ability to come under here and lift off this ring here. We will see that this ring is plain on the bottom. Oh, wait, no, hold on. Oh, no. Okay. Yeah, so you see, this is my issue right here. This little cutout needs to be over the lock bar. I really should have looked at those more carefully when I put them back together. I really should have. This is entirely, well, of course it's my damn fault. I did it. But nevertheless, I am just really living up to this whole not a brilliant man thing today. Okay. So now what I got to do is swap these guys over. I am very grateful that all of these is a TA. That's nice. At least I'm fighting only one battle, and at least they're using reasonably sized screws, right? Okay. What's going to really, actually, I'll be doing no less work either way. What I was going to say is what would infuriate me is if both of them had that cut out, such that I only had to rotate one of them. But on the bright side, though, I've learned a very valuable lesson, and I just gotten that right by luck. Somebody else might have put theirs back together and thought, wow, why does the action suck now? Only to realize that they had done this. Yeah. Kids, look carefully at your parts when you're disassembling. This is a very complex disassembly. This is like the boss level of disassembly. Look at this, folks. Here's the idiot. This one has no cutout. This one does have a cutout. And more specifically, this cutout matches this cutout right here. Right here. Guys, wow. Okay, so back at the ranch, we need to reinstall this washer. I'll put the washer over here. Did I just do that exactly backwards? I did. All right, drop that into here. All right, beautiful. Now I reinstall this, and I install it such that this cutout lives right there. All right, come on, go into place. You know you want to. Is the cutout located appropriately? What am I doing here? What's wrong with me? Oh, my bearings and such are all whack. A whack? It's not a word. Out of whack. That's perhaps it. All right, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is place this here. And actually, I'll go ahead and I'll just put in a couple of screws. Hopefully that'll help me align everything as well as push the bearings and bearing race down. Is this? No, that's a whack. Come on. I have to get everything properly positioned. And again, I need this cutout above the lock bar cutout. Had I noticed that, I would have been able to skip all of this pain. Every last drop of it would have been completely and totally avoided. Folks, be careful. This is why, some makers have warranty statements that are basically, like, if you screw up your knife during disassembly, that's on you, not us. And you know what? A lot of people have asked me, oh, Nick, isn't that ugly? No, it's not really. I mean, sure, I'd much prefer if makers were just like, hey, yeah, if you mess up your knife, you get a hug. But that's not realistic. That's not something we should expect from makers. Instead, what we should be expecting is, well, exactly what we're getting, right? If we screw up, we'll fix it. If you screw up, we'll help you fix it, but you might have to pay for the privilege. This could be a knife that I could see somebody screwing up in a disassembly context, just because of that little issue right there. Real subtle-like, but real important. Because now when we put this guy back together, we're going to have a much smoother action because the detent ball isn't going to be forced against the blade the entire time. Basically, we had a source of drag on the blade that was making everything run very slowly. And that was not great. It was working fine, it was functioning, the lockup was okay, but it just wasn't good. The action wasn't good. Okay, so remember this whole process where I got this guy into place as far as I could on this side. There we go. Then I flip the whole shebang over. I put pressure on the lock bar, and then I use my finger to force this guy back up through. Beautiful. Okay. Now we drop this here. Now we drop this here. Beautiful. Now we drop this here. This does not have any cutouts. Oh, man, what a freaking idiot. All right. I can picture somebody working at Reate watching my first disassembly, my first part of this, and going, just waiting for the pain, waiting for the... And they opened it up and they saw, 30 minutes, like, oh, wow. Oh, Nick. Oh, Nick. All right. Let's see here. Am I screwing this up in some way or another? No, not really. I mean, I'm sure I will at some point. I've already tried real hard. Oof. This is not going to go down in the books of history, in the annals of the world's existence, as the easiest disassembly I have ever done. As a matter of fact, I'm feeling a little bit like I dodged a bullet, partly because, A, I noticed that. Had I disassembled this such that that little gap, that little cutout was right up against the CF, I may not have ever noticed that that was a factor. I might have just been amazingly confused and, gone back to idiocy again. So I'm feeling pretty lucky there. But more importantly, this morning, at about 7 a.m., I sat down and I said, I need to do a disassembly because unfortunately, even before work, remember, the channel is not, oh, that's way freaking better. Oh, yes. But the channel isn't my full-time job, right? But I figured before work, I'd jam out a disassembly or two. And so I did the CKF 520. And then I was thinking I was going to do this guy. But then some little part of me in the back of my mind said, Nick, you jackass, look at all those screws. This might take a while. Oh, yes, that's better. Oh, my God. Oh, I'm so happy I'm Mickey Mouse. Oh, that's good. That's real good. And every hint of any problem is gone because now the lock bar can be forced all the way up into that cutout. See, the cutout right here is allowing the lock bar to go all the way up. And as a result, as I cut my phone open, that's cool, I am able to flip this knife, and it has just a beautiful, that's exactly how good it is, drop-shutty action. Oh, yes. This is like 10 times smoother than when we started. Absolutely no blade play. Solid like a freaking rock. Okay. You know what? That was a pain in my neck. That was one of the biggest pain in the neck disassemblies I've had in a little while. But the results, this guy ended up so much better than I started off. It's hard to, not that it was bad to start with, but now it's good. Now this action is just, oh man. Yeah, I might have to talk to my doctor in 6 hours. This is serious. This is good stuff right here. So anyways, this is done. That's the biggest thing. That's the very best thing this disassembly can be, is done. But it is. And so thank you all for joining me on this odyssey. The moral of this story is make sure that you figure out which one of these goes where. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and take this opportunity to just tighten these down fully. Make sure that I've got everything in position here. Because I really desperately, deeply don't want to be doing this again anytime soon. Actually, it wasn't that bad, but still. Yeah, you definitely need to take out both sides here. Beautiful. So much better. That's an action right there. Alrighty, so now on to the review of this very, very weird knife, which will probably be even more complicated to figure out than the disassembly itself. Holy crap, integral lanyard hole. That's cool. Alright, hope this has been interesting. Have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.